go again. I don't know what I'm doing today. I really don't. Look, we're going to take some photos. We're going to take some photos of this lone tree. Really nice tree. We're almost at sunset. So I'm just going to take some photos and let's see what happens. Okay, check this out. I just had to stop for a second because it was pouring, absolutely poured down. But this is really good conditions, okay? So get out when it's rainy. This is when you get some nice clouds and some nice colour. Now that big cloud directly above us, that's what just went past. Okay, so it's a big rain cloud, but now look at all this colour. Okay, so this is why keep revisiting spots, okay? Keep revisiting spots. Go out in bad weather, go out in good weather, and take lots of shots. Okay, so I'm not going to explain too much what I'm doing. I'm just going to take some shots, and then we'll show you those shots when it comes time to edit. Because this is looking really nice. And here comes that rain again. Okay, but look at that colour. Look at the colour we've got. That is really nice. Got the GoPro set up as well, doing a time lapse. So all I'm doing is I don't have a flippy screen. So this place works really well down low, getting that separation between the tree. But at the moment it's all about that sky. Okay, the sky's looking really nice. Okay, because I'm kind of deliberately underexposing because I don't want to blow out. I want to keep all that colour in the sky. So every now and then I'm just checking my histogram. And when I check my histogram, I literally point it towards the sun. I'm pointing it towards the brightest part of the sky. Okay, I'm going to turn my aperture down. I'm going to get my ISO up to 200. Okay, because I want a fairly fast shutter speed. Okay, and when the sky does this, yeah, just take lots of shots. Okay, I know this composition works. I've got all this light on this side. I might just move over this way a little bit to try and get a bit more of that light in. Okay, look at that sky now. Dramatic. That's what's happening now. That's what I'm seeing. Seeing all these clouds are just poured down with rain, sunset, drama. Okay, that's what we're going to recreate. We're going to bring out all this colour, all this texture. I've got a heap of shots. So I'm going to get a few more. Okay, so that's what I'm seeing at the moment. I'm seeing drama, so that's what this video is going to be all about. Let's show you how to bring out all that texture in the cloud, get all that colour. It's going to look really nice. It'll be really nice. So stick around for the editing session. Fast shutter speed to freeze those trees. So if I don't get any more shots, let's head over into the editing studio and we're going to do dark and moody, and I'll show you how we do that. Okay, so onto the editing side of things. Now this was the first image of the night, and as you can see the sky was really nice. Okay, so I did get some shots that I was quite happy with. One thing I wasn't happy with was my immediate foreground. We've got all these stingray lines along the front of the image, which I just didn't find particularly nice. Also, I did this one as a bit of a demonstration just to show that by getting down low, I don't like the way the tree's cutting through the horizon. So by getting down low, we can get that separation between the horizon and the tree. So to me, that just makes a nicer shot. But like I said, we've got lots of stingray lines. Things in the foreground just weren't great. Okay, so these, yeah, not my favorite images of all time. They're okay. If we compare it to another time when I went out, okay, so this was another time. So this will give you an idea of exactly how different locations can get. So this was on a higher tide, nice reflections, okay, different times of day get different effects. And this is without all the stingray lines, and we get some really nice textures in the sand. So after a northerly wind, the waves create all these patterns in the sand. I would have loved for it to look a bit more like this. If my foreground looked a bit more like this on the day, I would have been really happy. But it is what it is, okay? We can't always pick what the weather's going to do and what conditions are going to do, okay? So as far as I'm concerned, yeah, fantastic sky, foreground, just, I've tried to eliminate as much foreground as I can just to concentrate on the tree and the sky. But the reason we're here is for our dark and moody. So this is the raw file, and this is where things started. This was after the rain had passed. Clouds were starting to get a bit more drama about them. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to create a dark and moody image. So first thing I like to do is I always work on my foreground first. That's just a workflow that I get into, that I always work on my foreground first and then I start to develop my sky separately. So as a starting point, we're going to come over here to Adobe Landscape. Good starting point, especially for landscapes. Okay, I'm going to bring down my highlights a little bit, lift my shadows a little bit, and that's about all. Don't need to worry about my blacks and whites at this stage. Just trying to get my foreground roughly where I want it. So I just want to be able to see a bit more detail in this tree in particular. Okay, so if we zoom in there, starting to get all those greens in the tree, that looks nice. We're going to apply our lens correction. Make sure our lens correction is on. So in my previous video, I did the luminance range in Lightroom. Personally, I just prefer Photoshop. Photoshop does things a lot better, gives you more control and makes things look a bit nicer. Okay, so that's my foreground. Now what I'm going to do is come back to Lightroom, and now I'm going to work on my sky. So we'll take our exposure back down where it was. Now, dark and moody, first thing we want to do is add contrast. Contrast is going to create dark and moodiness. Okay, now all I'm looking at is my sky. So I might even bring down our highlights even more. Okay, just to get a little bit more detail in that blue sky. Okay, shadows I don't need to deal with. If anything, I would probably bring the shadows the other way because I do want my dark areas to be dark. Okay, now where the real magic happens with dark and moody is here in our effects panel, which used to be called effects, presence. Okay, so Adobe, yes, they did an update recently. They've changed the name of effects to presence. So if you haven't updated your Lightroom yet, it will probably be called the effects panel. It is now presence panel. So this is where creating dark and moodies, this is where the magic really happens. Now, these sliders, you've got to be careful with these because you can push them too far quite easily. And what I'm going to do is zoom in just so we can see the cloud. And I'm just going to lift my texture a little bit. Actually, I'll lift it all the way so you can see what it does. So that's all the way at 100%. Okay, so it's bringing in a lot more detail in those clouds. Now, I would recommend just going to around about 20 to 30%, but for the sake of YouTube, I'm going to crank it up to 50. Okay, same with clarity. If we lift our clarity, that's also going to bring in texture. Now, clarity you've got to be careful with because see how it's taking the color out and just making everything very crunchy. So this one, I would definitely keep it down around that 10 to 20%. And then finally our dehaze. Again, if we lift the dehaze, then it really gives us our dark and moody look. Okay, so if we zoom out again, that dehaze button, again, very easy to overdo, which is exactly what I'm going to do for the sake of this video. We're going to create that dark and moody look. Okay, but as you can see, it's completely blacked out our foreground now. So that's why I'm going to do a bit of a blend. I'm going to blend in our foreground with this sky. Now, for a good dark and moody, you almost don't want too much color. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to increase my temperature a little bit. Just get it to roughly where I want it. Okay, I think I want it around about there. I like the orange tones. Magenta, just going to play with that a little bit as well. Definitely don't want greens in there. Probably just give it a little bit of extra magenta just to bring in some of that moodiness. Okay, now if we want to, we can even take out some of the blues. So if we come down to our color mixer, click on the HSL, make sure you're on HSL, saturation, and I'm just going to bring some of the blues out of the image. Okay, because blues will make it look a bit more vibrant. We're going for dark and moody, so I'm going to take the blues out of the image a little bit. There's some greens in here which I don't like, so I'm going to bring those greens out as well. So all I'm doing is on my saturation slider, I'm reducing the saturation of the colors that I don't want in the image. Okay, so that's starting to look a bit nicer. Now that's starting to look moody. So if we look at our before and then our after, okay, that's the sky I'm looking for. A nice dark, angry looking sky. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open this one in Photoshop as well and just right click, edit in Adobe Photoshop. Now I've got my two images open in Photoshop. So it's the exact same photo, just two different exposures. We've got one exposure for our foreground, we've got all the detail in the tree, and then we've got an exposure for our sky. And this is why I much prefer Photoshop. You can do this in Lightroom. If you haven't seen my previous video on luminosity masking in Lightroom, you can do a very similar thing to what I'm doing here with luminosity masking. Okay, so what we're going to do in Photoshop is we're going to grab this dark and moody sky. I can just click and drag with our move tool, and again click and drag, and if we hold the shift key and then let go, it's going to place it directly on top. So I'm going to close that top layer now, and we're going to blend the two together just to make it look a little bit more natural. Now, the way I like to do my blend, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy my background layer. So Control and J will make a copy, and then I'm going to grab that copy and place it on top. Okay, so now I can see my foreground. Now what I want to do is blend in this sky. I want to blend in this dark and moody sky. So the regulars on my channel will know exactly what I'm going to do here. I'm going to create a luminosity mask. So we're going to come down to our masking tool. Once we've created our mask, we're going to come up to channels. We're going to hold our control or our command button and then click RGB, and that's created a luminosity mask. Okay, now I know there's plugins that you can get that will give you lights 1, 2, 3, 4, etc, etc. I'm all about simple and effective. Okay, and if we can do this without downloading plugins, that is simple and effective to me. So, and it all does the same job at the end. Yes, you get more control with the plugins that you can get, but this is a good place to start. Okay, it's created a luminosity mask, which is just selecting the brightest parts of our image. Okay, so once we've created that mask, what we're going to do is make sure that we do have our mask selected. We're going to grab a brush tool and we're going to select a black brush. So just toggle backwards and forwards between black and white. And what I want to do is have my opacity down fairly low. So 40% is good, because what we're going to do is blend in our horizon first and then work our way up and make it darker as we go up. Okay, now I want my brush a bit smaller, so square bracket keys on the keyboard will make our brush bigger or smaller. And first thing I'm going to do is do our horizon. So with that layer mask selected and a black brush, I'm just going to paint straight across that horizon. And it's only going to paint out the brightest parts of the image. So it's leaving that tree exactly how I want it. Okay, and it's just, if we have a look at this layer mask over here, you can see that it hasn't masked out the tree. It's just getting the brightest parts. And then I'm going to work my way up the image and paint more and more as I go up the image. Okay, maybe give that another pass just to make it look a bit nicer. Okay, now that I've got my horizon sorted, I'm going to come up to opacity, change that up to 100%, make our brush a bit bigger, and deal with the top part of the image. Okay, so I'm just painting out those brighter parts to reveal our darker exposure underneath. Okay, and then if we press Control and D, that will deselect our marching ants. Okay, and that's our blend. That's a very basic exposure blend. And as you can see from that mask, we've left the tree exactly as it is. So the reason I create that extra layer up here, if I hide that sky layer, there's our original foreground image, and there's the sky we've added in. And as you can see, the tree is exactly how it was. Okay, and we've just brought in that sky behind the tree. Okay, so luminosity masks are still by far and away just the best thing ever invented in Photoshop. And now that we've got two separate layers, we can do two things. We can either bring down our top layer, which is going to decrease our foreground to make everything a little bit darker, or we can bring down our middle layer, which is then going to decrease our sky to make that a bit brighter. Okay, so then you can find your personal preference. Okay, you can either go very dark and moody by making everything a bit darker, or find that balance in between. In this case, we are going dark and moody, so I'm going to bring down my brighter exposure. I'm going to bring down my foreground. There it's just a bit too bright, so I'm going to bring it down just a little bit. And I might even just mask out a little bit more of our foreground. So I'm going to turn our brush back down to about 17%, slightly smaller brush. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm just going to darken down that foreground just by painting on that top brighter layer. So I'm painting on that bright layer on that layer mask with a black brush. So I'm blacking out that brighter exposure to reveal the slightly darker one. Okay, so somewhere like that. So that's where we started, and that's with our moody sky. Okay, so that's a very basic starting point for our dark and moody. So I'm just going to come up to layer and flatten image. Okay, and now what we can do from here as a final little touch is if we come down to our adjustments panel, and what I'm going to do is grab a curves adjustment. I'm going to grab that curves adjustment right in the middle and just drag it down, and that's going to darken everything down. So now we're really starting to get dark and moody. Okay, we can close that, and again, because we've created, every time you do an adjustment layer, it creates a mask. So again, I'm going to grab my black brush, and you will see me do very similar things a lot, because I think the things that I show are the things you probably should learn in Photoshop first, and that is layers and masks. Okay, once you learn layers and masks in Photoshop, the rest of it will come with time. Okay, there's so many functions in Photoshop. Start with your layers, start with masking, and that's why I'm going to keep showing it, just so the more you do it, the more it'll start to make sense. Okay, so now that I've created a curves adjustment that's darkened everything, so if I grab a black brush, I'm going to black out those bits that I've darkened. So I'm just going to bring back some detail into that tree and just paint it in. Okay, and then if we have a look at before and then after, we've just darkened down the edges of our frame. And that's kind of the final tip with the dark and moody. Darken down the edge of the frame, deliberately brightening your subject where you want your eye to go. Okay, and that's it. That's how we create a dark and moody, a very simple dark and moody. There's a lot more we can do, but that's a starting point. Okay, that's a good starting point to get you a dark and moody. So if we go back to our original raw file, okay, so there's our original raw file, and that's where we've taken it. Okay, just brought some drama back into those clouds. That's it for this video. Hopefully that was nice and short and quick and easy. So thank you for watching. If you did like it, please give it a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe. There will be some more live streams coming soon. But that's it for this one. Thank you again, and I will see you next time.